Beginning in the 8th century BC, ancient Rome grew from a small town on central Italy's Tiber River into an empire that at its peak encompassed most of continental Europe, Britain, much of Western Asia, Northern Africa, and the Mediterranean islands. Among the many legacies of Roman dominance are the widespread use of the Romance languages, Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Romanian, derived from Latin, the modern Western alphabet and calendar, and the emergence of Christianity as a major world religion. After 450 years as a republic, Rome became an empire in the wake of Julius Caesar's rise and fall in the 1st century BC. The long and triumphant reign of its first emperor Augustus began a golden age of peace and prosperity. By contrast, the Roman Empire's decline and fall by the 5th century AD was one of the most dramatic implosions in the history of human civilization. Origins of Rome. According to legend, the twin sons of Mars, the god of battle, Romulus and Remus, established Rome in 753 BC. After being saved from drowning in a basket on the Tiber by a she-wolf, the twins managed to overthrow the local Alba Longa ruler and establish their own city on the banks of the river in 753 BC. Romulus, for whom Rome is called, rose to prominence as the first king of Rome after murdering his brother. A line of Sabine, Latin, and Etruscan, earlier Italian civilizations, kings followed in a non-hereditary succession. Romulus, Numa Pompilius, Tullus Hostilius, Ancus Martius, Lucius Tarquinius Priscus, or Tarquin the Elder, Servius Tullius, and Tarquinius Superbus, also known as Tarquin the Proud, are the 7 mythical kings of Rome. Even though they were called Rex, or king, in Latin, the Senate chose every monarch who succeeded Romulus. Rome's monarchy came to an end in 509 BC when Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, the 7th king, was deposed. Historians of the past described Lucius as harsh and despotic in contrast to his kind forebears. The rape of Lucretia by the king's son was reported to have sparked a popular rebellion. Lucretia was a virtuous noblewoman. Whatever the reason, res publica, or property of the people, was the basis for Rome's transformation from a monarchy to a republic. Rome was built on 7 hills, known as the 7 Hills of Rome: Esquiline Hill, Palatine Hill, Aventine Hill, Capitoline Hill, Quirinal Hill, Viminal Hill, and Caelian Hill. The early republic. 2 consuls, or yearly elected magistrates, inherited the throne from the monarch. They were the army's supreme commanders as well. Despite being chosen by the electorate, the patricians, the surviving members of the original senators from Romulus's era, dominated the Senate, which served as the primary source of candidates for the magistrates. The early republic's politics were characterized by a protracted conflict between patricians and plebeians, or the common people, who eventually gained some political clout after years of concessions from patricians, including the ability to propose and veto legislation through their own political body, the tribunes. The first Roman legal system, known as the 12 Tables, was written on 12 bronze tablets and put on display in the Roman Forum about 450 BC. These laws served as the foundation for all subsequent Roman civil law, and addressed matters of property rights, civil rights, and legal procedure. By the year 300 BC, the Senate, which at the time consisted solely of members from affluent plebeian and patrician families, had become the center of genuine political power in Rome. Military expansion. The size and power of the Roman state increased dramatically throughout the early Republic. Despite the Gauls' 390 BC siege and burning of Rome, the Romans recovered under the military hero Camillus, finally taking over the entire Italian peninsula by 264 BC. After that, Rome engaged in a string of conflicts with the formidable northern African city-state of Carthage, known as the Punic Wars. Rome seized complete control of Sicily, the western Mediterranean, and a large portion of Spain after the first two Punic Wars. A region of northern Africa became a Roman province after the Romans conquered and destroyed the city of Carthage during the Third Punic War, 149–146 BC, and sold the remaining citizens into slavery. Rome expanded its authority eastward at the same time, overthrowing Macedonian King Philip V and converting his realm into a new Roman province. Rome's cultural development as a society was strongly influenced by its military conquests, since interaction with highly developed cultures like the Greeks was beneficial to the Romans. Greek classics were translated into Latin to create the earliest works of Roman literature in 240 BC. The Romans would later absorb a great deal of Greek philosophy, art, and religion. Internal struggles in the late Republic. Rome's intricate political structures started to break under the weight of the expanding empire, bringing with it a period of unrest and bloodshed on the inside. Rich landowners forced small farmers off public property, widening the wealth divide while giving the more privileged groups more and more access to the government. Reform movements led by Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus in 133 BC and 123 BC, respectively, attempted to address these societal issues, but they were killed by their opponents. The first of a succession of warlords who would rule Rome in the late Republic was Gaius Marius, a commoner whose military prowess earned him the title of consul for the first of 6 years in 107 BC. By 91 BC, Marius was fighting back against assaults by rival General Sulla, who had become a military dictator in 82 BC. Following Sulla's retirement, Pompey, a previous ally, held a brief consular position before leading victorious military expeditions against Mithridates' forces in Asia and pirates in the Mediterranean. During this same time, Marcus Tullius Cicero, elected consul in 63 BC, became well known for his oratory skills after he masterfully foiled the patrician Catiline plot. Julius Caesar's rise. The victorious Pompey returned to Rome and, along with the wealthy Marcus Licinius Crassus, who put down a slave uprising led by Spartacus in 71 BC, and another rising star in Roman politics, Gaius Julius Caesar, created an uneasy alliance known as the First Triumvirate. In order to compete for the position of consul in 59 BC, Caesar came to Rome after winning military glory in Spain. Beginning in 58 BC, Caesar gained the governorship of 3 prosperous provinces in Gaul thanks to his alliance with Pompey and Crassus. He then set out to conquer the remainder of the region for Rome. The triumvirate was shattered when Pompey's wife Julia, who was Caesar's daughter, passed away in 54 BC, and Crassus was slain in combat against Parthia, modern-day Iran, the following year. In 53 BC, with traditional Roman politics in disarray, Pompey assumed the role of the only consul. Pompey's riches and military might in Gaul had overshadowed Caesar's, and he joined forces with his Senate friends to gradually weaken Caesar. Caesar and one of his legions crossed the Rubicon, a river that separates Cisalpine Gaul from Italy, in 49 BC. Caesar became the ruler of Rome for life in 45 BC, after his conquest of Italy sparked a civil war. From Caesar to Augustus. Less than a year later, Julius Caesar was murdered on the Ides of March 15, 44 BC, by a group of his enemies, led by the Republican nobles Marcus Junius Brutus and Gaius Cassius. Consul Mark Antony and Caesar's great-nephew and adopted heir, Octavian, joined forces to crush Brutus and Cassius and divided power in Rome with ex-consul Lepidus in what was known as the Second Triumvirate. With Octavian leading the western provinces, Antony the east and Lepidus Africa, tensions developed by 36 BC, and the triumvirate soon dissolved. In 31 BC, Octavian triumphed over the forces of Antony and Queen Cleopatra of Egypt, also rumored to be the one-time lover of Julius Caesar, in the Battle of Actium. In the wake of this devastating defeat, Antony and Cleopatra committed suicide. Octavian was the only ruler of Rome and its provinces by 29 BC. He took care to ensure that the populace accepted his absolute authority by ostensibly rebuilding the Roman Republic's political structures, while, in practice, keeping all actual power for himself in order to escape suffering the same fate as Julius Caesar. Octavian became the first emperor of Rome when he took on the title of Augustus in 27 BC. Age of the Roman Emperors. After a century of strife and corruption, Augustus's reign raised morale in Rome and brought about the renowned Pax Romana, which lasted for 2 whole centuries and brought wealth and peace. He oversaw the growth of Roman literature, art, architecture, and religion, in addition to enacting a number of social reforms and winning multiple military conflicts. With the help of his massive army and a developing cult of loyalty to the emperor, Augustus ruled for 56 years. Augustus was made a god by the Senate after his death, starting a long-standing custom of popular emperors being deified. Augustus's dynasty included the unpopular Tiberius, the bloodthirsty and unstable Caligula, and Claudius, who was best remembered for his army's conquest of Britain. The line ended with Nero, whose excesses drained the Roman treasury and led to his downfall and eventual suicide. 4 emperors took the throne in the tumultuous year after Nero's death. The fourth, Vespasian, and his successors, Titus and Domitian, were known as the Flavians. They attempted to temper the excesses of the Roman court, restore Senate authority, and promote public welfare. Titus earned his people's devotion with his handling of recovery efforts after the infamous eruption of Vesuvius, which destroyed the towns of Herculaneum and Pompeii. The reign of Nerva, who was selected by the Senate to succeed Domitian, began another golden age in Roman history, during which 4 emperors, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and Marcus Aurelius, took the throne peacefully, succeeding one another by adoption, as opposed to hereditary succession. Trajan expanded Rome's borders to the greatest extent in history, with victories over the kingdoms of Dacia, now northwestern Romania, and Parthia. His successor Hadrian solidified the empire's frontiers, famously building Hadrian's Wall in present-day England, and continued his predecessor's work of establishing internal stability and instituting administrative reforms. Rome continued to flourish and live in peace under Antoninus Pius, but during Marcus Aurelius there was constant warfare, including wars with Parthia and Armenia, as well as northern Germanic barbarian invasions. After falling ill and passing away close to the battleground at Vindobona, Marcus defied the non-hereditary succession tradition by appointing his 19-year-old son Commodus as his successor. Decline and disintegration. The decadence and incompetence of Commodus brought the golden age of the Roman emperors to a disappointing end. His death at the hands of his own ministers sparked another period of civil war, from which Lucius Septimius Severus emerged victorious. During the 3rd century, Rome suffered from a cycle of near-constant conflict. A total of 22 emperors took the throne, many of them meeting violent ends at the hands of the same soldiers who had propelled them to power. Meanwhile, threats from outside plagued the empire and depleted its riches, including continuing aggression from Germans and Parthians and raids by the Goths over the Aegean Sea. The reign of Diocletian temporarily restored peace and prosperity in Rome, but at a high cost to the unity of the empire. Diocletian divided power into the so-called Tetrarchy, rule of 4, sharing his title of Augustus with Maximian. A pair of generals, Galerius and Constantius, were appointed as the assistants and chosen successors of Diocletian and Maximian. Diocletian and Galerius ruled the Eastern Roman Empire, while Maximian and Constantius took power in the West. The retirement of Diocletian and Maximian from government had a severe negative impact on the stability of this system. After the subsequent power battles, Constantine, the son of Constantius, became the only emperor of a reunified Rome in 324. He renamed Constantinople and relocated the Roman capital to the Greek city of Byzantium. Once a little-known Jewish sect, Christianity became the official religion of Rome when Constantine established it at the Council of Nicaea in 325. Roman unity under Constantine proved illusory, and 30 years after his death, the Eastern and Western empires were again divided. Despite its continuing battle against Persian forces, the Eastern Roman Empire, later known as the Byzantine Empire, would remain largely intact for centuries to come. An entirely different story played out in the West, where the empire was racked by internal conflict as well as threats from abroad, particularly from the Germanic tribes now established within the empire's frontiers like the Vandals, and was steadily losing money due to constant warfare. Rome gradually lost its provinces one by one as a result of the weight of its own bloated empire. Britain by roughly 410, followed by Spain and Northern Africa by 430. Around 450, Attila and his vicious Huns devastated the empire by invading Gaul and Italy. A Germanic prince by the name of Odovacar took command of the Roman army in Italy in September 476. Odovacar's army crowned him King of Italy after toppling Romulus Augustus, the final Western emperor, and thereby ending the turbulent and protracted history of ancient Rome. The Roman Empire has finally fallen. Roman architecture. Roman engineering and architecture have left a lasting impression on modern society. When Roman aqueducts were originally built in 312 BC, they improved public health and sanitation and allowed towns to grow. The Fountain of Trevi in Rome continues to operate on a modernized version of an ancient Roman aqueduct, and some Roman aqueducts carried water up to 60 kilometers from their source. Roman cement and concrete are part of the reason ancient buildings like the Colosseum and Roman Forum are still standing strong today. Roman arches, or segmented arches, improved upon earlier arches to build strong bridges and buildings, evenly distributing weight throughout the structure. Roman roads, the most advanced roads in the ancient world, enabled the Roman Empire, which was over 1.7 million square miles at the pinnacle of its power, to stay connected. They included such modern-seeming innovations as mile markers and drainage. Over 50,000 miles of road were built by 200 BC, and several are still in use today.